The war room aboard the Eternal Vanguard, flagship of the Galactic Defense Coalition, smelled of burnt circuits and despair. Supreme Marshal Zarek Thorne stood at the holographic command table, his forearms folded across his broad chest, his dark violet eyes scanning the tactical map as sector after sector blinked from blue to red. He was Valdorian, a species that had ruled the stars for 6,000 years, whose bones were as dense as ship plating, whose nervous system could process battle data faster than most computers. He had never lost a war. He was losing this one. "Report," he said. His voice was low, controlled. The voice of a being who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury the dead could afford and the living could not. Admiral Jo, a sleek Cethran female with bioluminescent markings running down her neck and temples, stepped forward. Her kind were renowned tacticians, analytical, cold, brilliant. Right now, she looked like she had not slept in 3 rotations. "The Kroth Dominion has broken through the Merrick Line," Supreme Marshal General Me, commanding the 3rd Armored, reports his flank has collapsed entirely. He is requesting immediate reinforcement or permission to retreat. "There is nowhere to retreat to," Thorne said quietly. He pressed a finger to the map. "If the Merrick Line falls, the Dominion has a clear path to Centralis Prime. 40 billion civilians. Gone." From across the table, Commander New York of the Sylvari spoke, his translucent wings folded tight against his spine, a gesture of grief among his kind. "Supreme Marshal, we have committed everything. Every reserve. Every ship. Every soldier. The Kroth knew our doctrine. They studied our tactics for 2 centuries. They designed this war to be unwinnable." Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a quieter voice spoke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. Like a stone dropped into still water. "Then stop fighting their war. Start fighting yours." Every head turned. General Ethan Cross stepped into the light. He was human, which meant, to every alien eye in that room, he looked impossibly, almost insultingly small. Average height by his own species standards. No bioluminescent markings, no second set of arms, no natural armor plating. Just a lean figure in a coalition uniform, short dark hair, a jaw that needed a shave, and eyes the color of storm clouds over an ocean. Zarek Thorne had worked with humans before. Briefly. They were new to the coalition, barely 2 centuries into space travel, welcomed more as a diplomatic gesture than a military asset. Most coalition commanders considered them curious at best, reckless at worst. But Thorne was a being who judged by results. "General Cross," he said slowly. "You were sent as an observer. An advisor." "I was," Cross agreed. He walked to the holographic table without waiting for an invitation. He studied the map for 3 seconds, just 3, and then his fingers began moving. Rerouting. Reshaping. "I'm advising you now. This entire engagement has been fought on the Krotha's terms. Predictable flanking, predictable supply lines, predictable retreat vectors. You fight clean wars, Marshal. The Kroth don't. And that's why they're winning." Thorne watched him. "And what would you do differently, General?" Cross looked up. There was something in his eyes that Thorne would later spend years trying to describe to historians, not arrogance, not recklessness. Something older. Something that had been forged in 10,000 years of a species that had survived ice ages, pandemics, world wars, and its own worst impulses, and had emerged from all of it still breathing, still building, still moving forward. "I would give them something they've never modeled," Cross said. Humans. Part 2, The Iron Rain. The Battle of Merrick Station began at 0300 hours. The Kroth Dominion's High Command received the initial tactical projections with confidence. The Coalition's 3rd Armored was broken. The reserves were exhausted. The Supreme Marshal had no viable counteroffensive. By 0600 hours, the Merrick Line would be dust, and by 0900, the path to Centralis Prime would be open. The projections were wrong. At 0312 hours, General Ethan Cross personally led the first human expeditionary force, 12,000 soldiers, through a debris field the Croth battle computers had marked as impassable. No Croth commander would have ordered troops through it. The gravitational shear was unstable. The radiation levels were dangerous. The navigation was nearly impossible. Keyword, nearly. "Hi, we use KRNY hi," said Sergeant Day, the closest phrase in his dialect for what the humans were doing, borrowed from a coalition language he'd picked up in 6 months of service. They use what others will not. He grinned as the squad's ship scraped through a corridor of spinning wreckage at full burn. That's us, boys. That's always been us. The Croth never saw them coming. Cross had not planned a frontal assault. He had not planned to outgun the Dominion. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful, their numbers superior. What he had planned was something the Croth battle matrices could not process efficiently. Chaos. Controlled, deliberate, beautiful chaos. The human forces did not attack in formation. They attacked in waves, irregular, overlapping, each unit operating on local initiative rather than central command. When the Croth adapted to one attack pattern, another was already in motion. When the Dominion repositioned its heavy cruisers to counter the eastern flank, the humans weren't on the eastern flank anymore. They were everywhere. They were nowhere. They fainted and vanished and struck from angles that the Croth tactical AI had assigned a less than 2% probability. For the first time in the war, the Dominion's commanders began making mistakes. "They do not fight like soldiers," reported Croth Fleetmaster Vorer to his superiors. His voice was shaking, the first time it had shaken in 40 years of command. "They fight like they enjoy it. Like they are comfortable in the chaos. Supreme Command, I am requesting." He never finished the request. General Jomi, not Admiral Joe, but one of Cross's own human lieutenants, a quiet, compact woman who had once been a cave diver on Earth, had located the Dominion's command relay station through a method no alien tactical officer had considered. She had looked at where the signals were most redundant and assumed the enemy was protecting something there. She was right. She punched through the relay's rear shielding with 3 fighters and a prayer, and cut the Croth High Command's ability to coordinate their fleet in real time. The Dominion didn't fall apart. They were too disciplined for that. But for 11 minutes, they were blind. 11 minutes was all Cross needed. Part 3, After the Storm. At 0741 hours, the Croth Dominion's advance force began a full strategic withdrawal from the Merrick Line. It was the first time in the war that the Dominion had retreated. On the bridge of the Eternal Vanguard, Supreme Marshal Zarek Thorne watched the tactical map repaint itself in blue as sector after sector reported the enemy pulling back. Around him, officers from a dozen species were shouting, embracing, weeping in the quiet bioluminescent way of the Cethran, or drumming their lower limbs in the percussive victory signal of the Valdorian. Thorne did none of those things. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the debris field where 12,000 humans had done the impossible, and he was quiet for a long time. General Ethan Cross found him there 20 minutes later. The man was dusty, his uniform scorched at the shoulder, a medic's seal patch visible on his left forearm. He looked, Thorne thought, like someone who had just done a difficult but necessary thing, not triumphant, not broken. Steady. 40 billion people are still alive, Cross said simply. Because of you, Thorne replied. Cross shook his head. Because of us. Because the coalition gave us a chance to stand next to you. He paused. We're not the strongest species out here. We know that. We're not the fastest, or the most intelligent, or the longest lived. He looked out at the stars. But we've been surviving impossible things since before we knew the stars had names. That's not a boast. It's just who we are. Thorne regarded him for a long time, this small, short-lived creature from a pale blue world who had somehow just turned the tide of a galactic war. There is a word in the old Valdorian tongue, Thorn said at last. Korothval. It means, roughly, the fire that should not exist but does. We use it for phenomena that defy our models. Stars that burn too hot for their mass. Black holes that orbit in patterns our physics cannot explain. He turned to look at Cross. We will need a new use for it. Cross almost smiled. I'll let my people know. Epilogue: What the Galaxy Learned. The Battle of Merrick Station was recorded in Coalition archives as a turning point. Not just strategically, philosophically. Because for the first time, the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations were forced to confront a truth they had quietly overlooked. Humanity was not impressive because of what they were. Humanity was terrifying because of what they refused to stop being. They had no natural armor, but they built it. No natural fangs, but they forged steel. No natural immunity to the void of space, but they climbed into metal shells and went anyway. They were fragile beings who had decided, somewhere in the long, violent, beautiful story of their species, that fragility was not an excuse. They got tired. They got scared. General Jomi would later confess in her memoirs that she had been shaking so badly during the relay station raid that she could barely operate her controls. She had operated them anyway. That, the galaxy learned, was the human way. Not invincibility. Not fearlessness. But the stubborn, almost irrational insistence on continuing, through the debris field, through the fear, through the fire, until the thing that needed doing was done. The Croth Dominion would come again. Everyone knew it. But now the galaxy knew something the Dominion did not. The humans would be there when they did. And they would not be observers anymore.